All right, welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm Connor, and I'm here as always with Calvin.
Hello.
And Katya is with us again.
Hey.
And we are talking about the Banshees of Inisherin. I knew I was going to mess it up. We practiced right before, and I knew it. Inisherin. This is directed by Martin McDonagh. We had talked about one of his movies earlier, In Bruges, and that was released in 2009. His most recent movie to come out
was 2009?
Isn't it nuts?
That seems... I thought it was early 2000s.
No, 2009, yeah, I was surprised too.
Wow.
It feels like it's not that old. But and then he most recently did 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which was 2017. That feels like it just came out too.
Honestly, that feels like forever ago.
Really?
27. That was 5 years ago.
But that's what I'm saying. I feel like it just came out.
I don't think that. I feel like it came out like 10 years ago.
In Bruges?
No.
Oh, Ebbing.
Yeah, 3 Billboards.
Either way, both great movies. Same director. He wrote and directed Banshees as well. So let's see. What is your elevator pitch? What do you guys think of this one?
I think if this is my elevator pitch for this one would be: man tries to become best fiddle player of all time by cutting off all his fingers.
Sure.
See, I've got a Farcical Fiddler, Flings fingers at friend.
Fuck. Okay. I don't even want to have one. That's the greatest elevator pitch. I love that.
I was stuck between farcical and facetious. I feel like they both have their merits.
Right. But yeah, so that's not Domhnall Gleeson. That's Brendan Gleeson is in this, and so is Colin Farrell, and they are also cast in Bruges, Martin McDonagh's other film. I thought it was great to have them back together. I like how it's way different than in Bruges, though, where it's like they're buddies, and this is the polar opposite of that. It made me sad. It made me wish I was watching in Bruges because they're so fun together when they're kind of ripping off each other. Mm-hmm. And then this one is the opposite, where they are not getting along.
Which I've heard that a lot, and I get the idea, but I just watched In Bruges, and I never actually saw them as friends ever. I feel like I saw them in Bruges as like older brother, younger brother, or like dad and child kind of relationship.
Co-workers.
Co-workers. I don't know. I never really felt like I've seen them like buddy. I get that they care about each other though,
sure.
For sure. But it seems like I never get to see when they're just like both like each other at the same time.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was more the role model type thing, which I was wondering if that was going to take place in this movie as well, because there's still an age gap between them. But no, he's just tired of hanging out with, what's his name? How do you say Podrick? Is that what it is?
Pádraic.
Pádraic?
Yeah, Pádraic.
Yeah,
I kept thinking it was Podrick, like the kid from Game of Thrones is all I kept thinking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought they were going to go with his nickname more often, because I think that Colm calls him Perry.
Perry?
Yeah. Someone called him Perry at the beginning of it.
Oh, but I think that was that part of his last name though? Because sometimes they say their whole names and it got a little clumped up together.
I don't think so.
No? Oh. Yeah,
it would have been a lot more of a mouthful than just Perry.
Would have been.
So I want to ask you guys, because Irish spelling is really, really strange. Mm-hmm. So Kerry Condon plays Siobhan, which is the sister of Colin Farrell's character. Mm-hmm. How do you think you spell Siobhan?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
It's Siohhn. No, yeah. Siohbahn.
You're so close, actually. It's Siobhan. But that's crazy close. That's nuts.
I've
that's
seen
because
that.
I've seen it before.
Yeah.
What's her name? The girl from Lady Bird. That's
That's her. No, I thought she was Saoirse, or is she not?
Oh yeah, that's Saoirse. But
Or
yeah,
is it
like
Saoirse?
yeah, you're right. It's Saoirse. And I also I knew that was the spelling for the sound, and I looked at the spelling of her name in the credits.
Oh, okay.
Dude.
Yeah, so I'm not like over here like, oh yeah, I'm a
But dude,
connoisseur of Irish names and spellings. You lesser people.
That's like my whole thing growing up. Well, I thought like massage and massage were like two different things. Like massage came out of your shower spout, and like massages were like nice. This is the same thing. I've seen Siobhan, that name, written so many times.
You should really clarify why you think that.
Yeah, what is massage? What is
something coming
like,
out of your shower?
Like
I'm like disgusted imagining something very strange.
No, because like you can rotate it to make it on the massage setting, but it just comes out like
oh my God.
Talk, and it's like not nice. It's just like a mass of water hitting you repeatedly.
I was thinking like goo, and it's like, oh, there's all this massage that flowing out of my faucet.
I feel like
No.
it's not a semantic problem that you have with your shower.
No, but anyway, I have seen Siobhan written so many times and heard it, but I've always said Siobhan when I read it.
Yeah, I've always said that too. There's also like a place in Elden Ring, which I've been playing a lot of, called it looks like Siofra River, but it's Siofra River.
Oh, okay. Now that we've gotten that out of the way.
Like, yeah.
I wouldn't have spelled it right. Don't worry.
So Calvin, what movie did you see? Like, what was your experience? What'd you take from this?
So honestly, I saw maybe an interpretation that I don't think a lot of other people will have taken it for, because it's very, very subtle. I don't think it's his main point, but I saw a movie that was about the absurdity of human legacy, that they'd rather cut off the thing that they want to do rather than fulfilling it. And I kind of think of it as like an allegory or like a metaphor, same as Van Gogh. Like, if you think of that story as being completely true, which I'm not totally sure on the historical details, but like, he couldn't draw an ear, so he cut it off. And gave it to someone, like, as like, here's the actual representation, which I can't do, which I don't actually think is what happened.
I always heard he sent it to an old girlfriend or something.
Yeah, and he was trying to draw an ear for her. That's the classic story that I've heard.
Oh,
but I don't
that's
think
that's kind of sweet. Like, I couldn't draw you an ear, so here's my ear.
Yeah, that's.
Aw.
I mean, I think that you would kind of think that, like, this,
That's what
like,
gets the ladies going.
Yeah, like I've cut off my fingers because, like, I don't want it. That's such a sweet sentiment. He's going to such lengths to let him know to, like, shut the fuck up.
It's like a very defining thing, right? Like, would you cut off a body part for someone you love or for someone you hate? Like,
Yeah,
which one are you gonna pick?
Exactly, and I think that's the thing, is like what they drive home the difference between being nice and leaving a legacy. Like, I just can't have you around. You're holding me back, holding me down, and the fact that, like, you know, like, this is like literally like, I could either have these fingers and talk to you and not do anything, or I could cut them off and not do anything. Either way, like, you in my life, you were the one holding me back. And I think that's like a big part of what this movie is about, is like why, like, Siobhan leaves, because she needs to make something. She need, like, you know, her brother is in like dire straits, but like, she's like, I can't be here. Like, that's not my my calling.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, no, I agree about the idea of it's surrounding like legacy, and I thought it kind of focused on, especially Brendan Gleeson's character, is like his own mortality and like, what am I going to do with what I have, the time I have left. And I sort of thought that was kind of the message for every character, is like, what is important to them, like what. And Parik, it seems like what's important to him is to care about people and have people care about him. And then Siobhan, like, later on, she has to go and like kind of forge her own path because she's stuck in this place. She's stuck on this island. She needs to do something else. So I thought it was like kind of encountering their own mortality and like what is important to them moving forward. So I agree with you. It's like, to him, it's his legacy, and like, what is he going to be remembered for?
Yeah. So, and then just as a quick synopsis of the whole movie, it's about two friends that have been friends forever, and suddenly one friend doesn't want to be friends anymore, and he wants to be left alone, and he threatens to cut off his own fingers if his friend doesn't leave him alone. And that's it. It's a long movie for such a short synopsis.
Sure.
I mean, you do have 10 fingers, so.
I like that idea of him deciding like what's important to him is to have this legacy and like leave his mark. Because I think that's kind of a struggle that people just have with in general. It's like, am I going to spend time like working on my success? Like, is my career going to be important to me, or is my family going to be important to me? And I think that Parik and Colm both kind of show the two sides of that, where for Colm, it's like, it's important to him to invest time and work. And for Parik, he's like, you know what? I just like to be around people, and I just like to enjoy the life I have. Like, he's like such a little kid. Like, everything is just nice and fun to him. And he's not really taking it all seriously, but he seems to be having a better time than everyone else. So I like that idea, is like, what's important to you? Is it, you know, career, or is it happiness?
Yeah, and I think it's the difference in the way they see the chats that they have, as it being nice, normal chat, and versus useless chat.
An aimless chat.
Yeah, exactly.
I love what he says. Colm says, he's like, you want me to have a meaningless chat with a limited man? That's like one of my favorite lines.
He's like, no, nice, normal chatting. I'm going to ignore the limited, which is also why I think it's so cool that, or not so cool, but it's so important. This is just on this small town. It's just this tiny little space. And you can just imagine it being a hard life, but also like as a small town, it's everyone has your back. You talk to everybody. Everyone knows everyone. It can be a really, really nice place to be. I think a lot of people want that. But then there's also a lot of people who feel so stuck in it to different level and have different levels of either awareness around it or have different ways of dealing with it. Like Siobhan just leaves, whereas Colin has to do something he doesn't want to leave, really.
Yeah, I think, and she even says that it's so nice being on the mainland where no one is mental and bitter, and she's like, well, it's probably because everyone's from Spain. But yeah, I thought that was a funny little joke, especially coming from like Martin McDonagh writing it in because he is Irish.
He's Irish, but he's born in, I think, lived in London or was born in London, maybe. Which is why it's funny too when they throw little jokes like, "What are you English?" When he's like, and yet.
Wasn't there a joke too? He's like, because it's the Civil War, in Ireland. He's like, man, things were just so much easier when it was just us fighting the Brits or whatever.
Yeah, we were just killing the English.
Yeah, it's great.
I do love a lot of those.
And I think too, it's like because it's a small town, it makes this relationship ending like such a big deal because it's not harder. Because he tries to become friends sort of with Barry Cogan's character Dominic, but he's like he's like the extreme end of what I think Park is. Like very, very childish, very dim. Like doesn't realize like he's kind of the butt of the joke all the time.
Yeah, but he also still knows more words than Park. That's true. Right. Like he throws out when he's like touche, and they're like, what? What's that? He's like, it's from the French guys. Like, get over it.
But yeah, so like losing that relationship is a huge deal because it's not like you're in the big city where it's like, okay, well, I'll get a different job or I'll move on or I'll find new friends. I'll be a part of something else.
You can't even choose to not see them.
Yeah,
you're gonna see them. You have one pub.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's got to be so hard. It's got to be so hard then to do that. Like, so I remember specifically a moment of doing this to one of my friends, being the Colin, basically. Just we were friends for a really long time, and we had a great time like going out and partying and stuff. And then like I left the area. I came back like a year or two later. I was different. I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. She was still doing the same thing. And I sat her down. I was like, I don't think I like being with you anymore.
Sure.
Like, I don't like what you like. And I basically said, yes, she's not smart enough to do anything else, which was not true, but it's exactly how I felt at the time. I was like, if I keep doing this with you, we keep doing the same thing together. So how do I move on or grow when you're not? And I feel like Colin just really felt like, how do I expand? How do I have students if you're like my best friend and want to chat every day?
Yeah. About your horse's shite.
Yeah.
But I thought the exact same thing. I thought like this was it's so interesting to think about like, the pop cultural problem of toxic friends and setting boundaries and cutting everybody out of your life that isn't giving you happiness and those sorts of things. And what would happen if you put it in the context of a small island where you can't go anywhere?
Like, how do you ghost somebody?
Yeah, I mean, like, the problem is like there are no support systems anymore, and they clearly know that still. I mean, Colm still picks him up and takes him home, punches the police officer Kearney when he's giving him crap about his donkey at the end of the movie too. Like still there's this bond and this friendship. It's just the other parts of the friendship aren't good enough to continue that part of the relationship. So it's so interesting to see that because they're in such close proximity, those things can't go away, and you're losing more than just a friendship in that case. Like, whereas with us, we're just losing friendships, but we have all of these. We have the state, we have family members, we have more options available to us if we cut out one person that's really close to us. So losing like what is a third of your life in this relationship, they really drive home how crazy that is.
Yeah. And I think one thing that makes it interesting is the reason he's choosing to end the friendship is just because he's like, I'm spending too much time having conversations with you. It's not like you're a toxic person in my life because like you're making me drink too much, or like I miss work all the time because you're always dragging me to do this and that. Or it's not like what I think you would typically find is a reason to end a friendship. And so like it made it, I think Colm is like not very, it's hard to be sympathetic for him, I think initially, because I mean, Park is just a nice guy trying to have a good time, and he seems like a genuinely good friend. He's not someone who's like dragging him down or anything.
But he does keep breaking into his house.
Sure.
Without being invited.
Yeah. I mean, it's just that small town thing, I guess. Because what we talked about that in Goodnight Mommy, where it's like a small town and the Red Cross people just walk into their
They're just
house.
walking.
Yeah, that's just normal.
Yeah, that's just what people do in small towns, I guess.
Here too, though, yeah, with Colin getting so much older, yeah, I feel like it just gives you pause to just stop and think. I guess about legacy, but also maybe just about how you want to really spend your time. Like, hey, now this is all getting much clearer for me. It could be over at any point. And Parik's obviously younger, so he's like, as long as we're here, we have all the time in the world. He's very much in the moment.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of himself Martin McDonagh put into Colm's character, because he's talked about, like, maybe I'll never, like, it's been a while since I've made a movie, like maybe I guess I'll get back into making movies. Like, he has like this awareness about his own legacy, and putting yourself into something that seems ultimately meaningless, because Colm talks about how, like, everybody remembers Mozart. Like, I don't know who that is. Like, so that disproves your theory.
Yeah.
And he's also, and then when Siobhan is also like, it was 18th century rather than 17th century. It seems like such a little gotcha at the same, in one breath. But if you really think about it, it's also the fact that no one actually cares that much about you. Like, your name is attached to something that gives them something. They make it their own. So it's not really even about you, and the details don't matter. So whatever you are in your life, it's like, who cares? It's just if something gets remembered about you. And it could be good or bad. And I think that's kind of what he's driving home the point of, is that what Colm is actually probably going to get remembered for is in the same vein as Van Gogh. Like, this is a guy who's just so crazy into his work, or like, this is like, he went down such a had a little bit of a mental break in the end of his life and just cut off all his fingers, because he had to make his
what are
art.
people going to remember now? Are they going to remember the piece of music that he wrote and gave to the town? Or are they going to remember him directing with bloody hand?
Yeah, like
flinging
all
everywhere?
over the table. Oh my
His blood
gosh,
is literally
yes.
all over that town now, like literally.
Yeah, and it's like a heavy-handed. Okay, well,
It's not that heavy of a hand.
but
Not anymore.
but it's like a metaphor. Like, he's putting himself into the music basically, and just like throwing himself around. Like, I'm going to leave a legacy, whether that's my blood on your door or like on my violin. It's so strange to think about, but I think it's like saying good and bad, like, because it's not just about it being bad in the context of Colm. It's also like the good of, like, you don't belong here, you need to go and make something for yourself because you're more talented than anybody else, with Siobhan leaving.
I also think it's kind of it's ironic that he makes such a big deal about, like, I'm going to end this friendship so I can make music, and you never actually hear the piece be played. Mm-hmm. And so, I like that idea of, like, well, what is he really going to be remembered for? I think the idea is that he's not going to be remembered for the music because we never hear it. And people are going to be like, oh, that's the crazy guy who cut off all of his fingers.
Yeah.
Is that the one that he was trying to he was like playing in the pub, like trying to direct the other kids to do?
Yeah, I think he was.
Is that like The Touch?
I
we
thought
don't
it was
hear
a
the whole
different
thing.
song. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I thought it was
One of
his.
the other-
I thought he was teaching them his song.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe.
But
I
we
guess,
don't hear the whole song, and we don't know that we heard the whole song.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of on purpose because it's like hinted at, because he says he's finished it.
And we hear the first part.
Yeah. And Park's like it sounds like he's trying to get him to play it, and Colm just like won't indulge because they're not friends anymore, and he's like trying to get that through to him.
Yeah, he's just not going to play it for him.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that is so interesting is when it starts to become about his legacy and not about the friendship, how off the rails that throws Parik's life. He doesn't want to be a good person anymore. Like, he just doesn't have it. He doesn't have it in himself to be a good person anymore because he has nothing. He starts being underhanded, trying to get rid of Colm's friends. And when he admits to other people that's what he did, like, wow,
not
this
that
like
nice.
you're not nice anymore. I thought you were different than one of those other people. And like, I think that's the despair that Colm sees. It's like, what, there aren't any even nice people anymore, and everything is bleak. And I think we can get into Dom later, but I think he commits suicide. I don't think he slips off.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Dominic. I think that's very much related to their feud.
Yeah, and I think it's all like you mentioned, Katya. We were talking afterwards about ripples. Like every action that someone did had multiple ripples on someone else.
That's part of what I liked about this movie too, is because you got to see the small little thing between friends, but it's happening in this town where everyone's listening and watching and spreading it, and then these people have other friends, and then you have like the war going on in the background, and that's like an even bigger example of what's going on here. But yeah, it's just so much more obvious. It's like if you want to leave a legacy, but everything that you're doing in your real life is hurting other people, then what's your legacy? Or if you want to be a nice person and then that's shattered because the person you thought you were the nicest to and because and for no longer even likes you, why be nice anymore? And then everyone just like starts breaking down. That Dominic's like, you're not even nice anymore. Is anybody nice anymore? I'm gonna shoot my last shot, try to get Siobhan to date me. She doesn't. It's like that was his last. He was like, well, this is the last thing I haven't done, basically.
Yeah, I'll just watch Barry Keoghan. He's always like, I think the best part of any movie I've seen him in is he's one of my favorite actors. Yeah. I just love, he's like, I'm going to get back to doing the thing I came over there to do. He's just like so goofy and so funny in this.
Yeah, but he really like I love how he kind of accentuates some situations or, kind of makes them worse, and he's really loud, but he's also just kind of tender and nice at sometimes. Like he's just like, you're gonna be all right.
Yeah, there's an authenticity to his character, and I just feel like the way he delivers all of his lines, I don't think that anybody wrote any of his lines that he's ever delivered. He's like, oh, I have a different idea for that. Can I do this?
That's what it feels like.
Wow, that's perfect.
He just is Dominic.
Yeah, like the words themselves don't feel like they fit with any of the other characters, because the way he delivers them is like, wow, that just feels like it's coming out of you and not from a script that fit into all of these relationship interplays.
Yeah, and one of my favorite parts is what kind of underlines how ridiculous what Colm's doing is because, Park starts, him and Dominic are drinking on the wall, and he starts saying something about Colm again, and Dominic just gets up and was like, yep, I told you if you started talking, I was leaving. Bye. He just leaves. It's like, that's a reasonable response. Just walk away. Don't go cut your fingers off.
Yeah.
Like, there's multiple ways to end a conversation. It's crazy.
All right, Katya, what movie did you see?
So I saw some Legacy, but more than anything, I think I just saw a story of getting older and feeling stuck. I guess Legacy goes into that. It's so hard as a younger person or someone who's in a newer age where anything you do is going to get lost in everything else. Eventually it's not like going to stand out necessarily unless you're like Rihanna or Kim Kardashian and you're going to live forever. But it feels like such a different thing to feel. So for me, it felt like a lot more about, just the fear of, maybe not even the fear, but just, the existential threat of going away forever and what that actually means and how useless all this war is and all the fighting is. And it doesn't matter who's fighting. It's just kind of pointless. So I guess that kind of goes into Legacy. I didn't pick up so much Legacy. I know they talk a lot about Legacy throughout the movie. And that's obviously what he's trying to do. But at the end, once it's all over, once he's kind of fought the fight with Park and it's gotten to the point that he wants it to be, that Colin wants it to be, like all thoughts of Legacy they feel kind of gone. And we might talk about that more later, but, it seems almost like he realizes it's not that important.
Well, it's also like in the way he's going to have a legacy is it's not really attainable anymore because he doesn't have any fingers to play the music that he wanted to be remembered for.
But he wrote a song.
I suppose that's true.
He got a ditty out.
Yeah, but how's he ever going to play it again if he didn't? I mean, maybe he was teaching it to those kids. Maybe he didn't teach it to anyone and didn't write it down.
Yeah.
So, and he only just knows how to play it.
It looks like he was writing. He was writing something.
Yeah, I mean, he could have been. I mean, but it's also I felt like that could have also been the case because some people play their music like that. It's more of a like an internal thing, and they don't note anything.
Also, his house got burned down.
Yeah, so any notes he did have are probably gone. But yeah, I feel like that's a lot of his movies is the absurd again, like we talked about in Bruges, just like I listened to a podcast on Nietzsche a little while ago, and I don't think he's like a great philosopher, but I think he did point out a couple things about like as the world becomes like societies become more and more secular, and the average citizen is presented with the loss of God. What happens? I don't think that God is necessarily something that anybody needs. But you need to replace it with something. You need to have like a reason and a purpose and a hope. And if you don't have those, well, what do you do? Like, I think that's what a lot of what his films, I think actually a lot of modern literature and a lot of modern art is about this idea of like, what does any of it actually mean if this is it? And we have spent millennia thinking that there's more and would want to be moral people. Like why does any of it matter? Like, should I be a good person and enjoy this, or should I try and make a legacy that I'll never even be able to see?
That's the problem with technology. The easier your life gets, the harder you have to think about things, or the more time you have to think about stuff. Mm-hmm. It's probably why when you get old, you start thinking about all this stuff, because you just have more time to think about it.
Yeah, I do think that like
I mean,
yeah, but
to some extent.
Yeah, I think that like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think is something that is going to be continuously revisited as we move higher and higher up into standards of living. Like, obviously, not everyone in the world it has gone to the point where they need to revise the hierarchy. There are still people that struggle with food security and drinkable water, and those are still very necessary. But as societies overall start to transcend those basic needs, those are just a given, then we need to start talking about then all of the other things become a lot more important, like mental health. Like, I don't want to sound like Cosmo, but at the same time, like, I mean the magazine Cosmo.
Okay, I was like, which Cosmo? Is this another? Is this like Is there a Cosmo in Fairly Odd Parents?
Cosmo and Wanda.
Yeah.
I was like, which Cosmo is it?
Yeah, I was going deep dive reference there. But yeah, I don't want to but the thing is like those things get so much more important when all of our basic needs are met, and we really need to look at like society will get bad from other places that we have deficiencies in, that we have not paid attention to for decades and decades because we've been worrying about other problems like plague. I mean, that's a big deal.
Sure.
That hopefully will not be as big a deal later in the future. But that doesn't seem to be the case. I think a lot of scientists thought that by now we would not really need to worry about it, but it's obviously still a major concern.
Yeah, but overall, I think McDonagh's biggest message is just stick to your principles, man. Do what you say you're going to say. Like, the only movies I've watched were In Bruges 2 days ago and this one. And yeah, just like, if you say you're going to do it, do it. But also, yeah, what is being a good person? Is it being nice to your friends? Is it being nice to most people? Is it being nice to everyone? Does being nice to one person involve shooting another person for them? It's like, how do you even be nice at some point? And I think, yeah, sometimes Parek struggles with that. Like, what's the point of being nice, and what is even nice?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting, the fact that you mentioned in Bruges, where after killing what he thinks is a child, Ralph Fiennes' character kills himself because that's what he said earlier in the movie.
That's what he said he'd do.
Yeah. I think that there was like, when we saw the trailer for this, like, I'm going to cut off one of my fingers if you bother me again. And that felt like a very real threat coming from Martin McDonagh's movies. Like, oh, that's going to happen. And then when he's like, next time he bothers me again, it won't be just the one, it'll be all 4 left. You like knew that he was going to kind of his fingers.
Which is kind of, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I don't have anything more.
I was going to say it was kind of nice almost knowing what to expect. Like, it made it brought the shock factor way down. I don't even think any of this movie was sensational at all. Like, in Bruges, there's definitely a little bit more sensational moments and sensational gore and things like that. Yeah, heads exploding like near the end. But having watched that and kind of knowing that if he says it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it just made you more interested in like thinking about why it's happening or why he's doing it, or you didn't even, there was no tension around, is he going to do it? Mm-hmm. Well, he's going to do it.
And it makes Parek's behavior like so much more like unexplainable.
Yeah,
too. It's like you're hurting this other person too. And it's like, but you're going to continue to try and like repair this relationship. It's like he is 100% honest. He's going to throw every finger he has at your door if you keep doing this.
What if this is all a story of addiction? And Parik and Colin are two people as one.
Is that the movie that you watched?
Because he keeps going back to Colin because he's addicted to him.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that more in further interpretations at the end, because I think that's a very interesting idea still too.
Right.
Yeah, and just being, totally changing when someone's gone, being so codependent on someone and what happens. Or I guess dependent, because they weren't codependent.
Yeah, I mean, well, you could say codependency. I think that Colm just woke up one day and just realized that he wasn't codependent. I think I didn't see that as a word that came to my mind when I saw this movie, but I could see that. I do think that like when you have limited the number of support systems that you have, that like codependency is something that happens all the time on those islands. And why not despair when one person wrongs you even slightly?
Right.
Because that's like, that's your world.
That's your world. And that's why it makes it's so hard, right? Like their parents, Parik's parents have died. He's living in their house with his sister, and then he just loses everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't think he's ever been lonely, right? Siobhan's like, "Are you ever lonely?" And he's like,
I love it that he
just
like scoffs at her over
Yeah.
it.
He's like, "What is wrong with everybody today? Like, what the hell is going on?" It's just like, guys, get out of here. Of course, like, just we're like, he's probably like, we're in paradise, and I mean, this is beautifully shot in a beautiful place, and you can so easily see that, but you can also so easily see everything else.
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting, then comparing the difference between Siobhan and Parik, who have different aspirations in life, and how the context of this island is hell for one and heaven for the other. And when you change parts of it, then it becomes hell for everyone. So with that, Connor, what movie did you see?
I saw the Banshees of Inisherin. I was hoping that would hit better.
It hit all right.
Yeah, that was a pretty good hit.
All right.
I laughed more at that than I did throughout the entire of In Bruges. So
I just don't think that. I think that you weren't in the right headspace. You did too much crying and not enough laughing.
okay. Anyway, sorry, Connor.
No, you're good.
Which Banshees did you see?
So I originally, I think when I was first going through it, I was like, oh, this is just like a breakup movie. And it's just, instead of it being a boyfriend, girlfriend, I was just thinking like, oh yeah, this is just, Colin Farrell's going to go through all these different stages of like losing a girlfriend or whatever. I mean, that was sort of like the idea, I thought. You know, the sadness, like what is it? Was it DABDA? Depression, anger, bargaining,
Despair.
Acceptance.
Oh, I
I thought it was just going to be like, these are the stages of, of a breakup.
Of grief, yeah.
Yeah. And then as it went on, I was like, okay, this doesn't really feel like that. I thought it was kind of the idea of maybe paralleling their kind of breakup and their split to the Civil War going on in Ireland as well. It's like the idea that even though Colm doesn't want to have this relationship anymore, and he's like we said earlier, like sticking to his principles, and so he can no longer live like this way with this other person, and that's what's caused their split. But he still, I mean, there's not like anger about it. He doesn't hate him, and he even helps him up after Parik's been punched by the police officer. And I kind of thought like maybe that was the idea of this Civil War in Ireland. It's like, we can't agree with each other and we can't get along, but like we're all still like countrymen and we need to figure it out still. And so like maybe a way of coexisting, but not being in like a friendly relationship anymore. But we can't keep killing each other. We can't keep hurting each other, which is what keeps happening. Colm keeps cutting off his fingers, and then it eventually leads to Parik burning down his house. But eventually they need to stop. They need to come to terms. They'll never have the same relationship they did, but they can't stay on this direction anymore. Yeah,
and I think that if I were to say anything, that the main point of the movie would be is that it's an allegory of the Irish Civil War. And I don't know if this part of it was also called The Troubles. Obviously, we did Belfast.
I was gonna say, it's a good companion movie to Belfast, where they're the same way. They're like, hey, don't shoot me today, but you can shoot me tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, like, don't come over here, we'll be fine.
Sure.
But they have to go over there. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the same thing.
I think of Colm's character then as being an allegory for Ireland. Like, if you guys don't stop fighting, if you don't, like, you're just gonna lose your entire country. You're gonna lose your countrymen. You're gonna lose your livestock. Everything's just going. because you just keep pushing the issue of why things are different. Because I mean, they talk about too, like the officer going to go help with an execution because one of the I don't remember the names. Obviously the IRA and the something Free Alliance, I think is what it was.
I think it's funny that you don't remember because he doesn't seem to care either.
Yeah,
yeah,
He's like, I don't care who's executing who.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, the Free Alliance, they're gonna kill a couple of the IRA boys, and he's like, was it the other way around?
He's
And
like,
yeah.
he's like, I mean, I'd go to execute you if I was getting paid whatever he's getting paid or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really the point. Is like, it's ridiculous that people are okay with the insanity of fighting against your own countrymen in a way that hurts you and everyone you love because of the fight for its own sake.
Yeah, so the Irish Civil, just a little bit of history background. The Irish Civil War was before the Troubles.
Okay,
The Irish
but the
Civil
Troubles
War
is
was
like
then. The Troubles was 1968 to 1998.
yeah, okay.
It's the
And
30-year
I think
war.
like when I was doing
Probably fed off of it.
yeah, because that's what I was in my research for Belfast, that it was talking about like, okay, we want to talk about the Troubles. Let's go back to 1780.
Yeah, basically
Yeah, 'cause I
all
mean-
the way back.
Yeah, there's just a lot of political dissension and problems with Ireland that have led up to the Civil War, even to this point. So it's hard to really put into a box what the problem was.
It's probably all the drinking, man.
I mean, they did confess to that a lot.
Really? Like this fight was started because they were drunk.
No, I mean in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, just I think more of the we haven't like really talked a lot about cinematography or anything, but I love the kind of the parallel of them seeing like smoke off in the distance in the mainland, and then after Pádraig has burned down the house, it's like a similar shot, and that's why I was like, okay, this is just kind of a different perspective or like a little microcosm of the Civil War is their relationship, like their feud, because then you see the little smoke in the background. And
Yeah.
I just think those two shots mirror each other really well.
There are a lot of really great shots.
Yeah.
I love all the light, like all the naturally lit.
I don't think
everything.
all of it was natural. Oh yeah, like inside the
everything
houses.
felt very naturally lit
Yeah.
inside the houses, inside the pub, the windows,
Yeah, it felt very
made it feel
true to the
natural.
period.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that because it is a microcosm, because it is an allegory, it feels like folk tale-ish. Katya brought that point up to me earlier, or one of you
Little
did.
story.
Yeah, and I think
Fairy tale,
that's
folktale.
and I think that's very interesting when you think of it like that, especially with the presence of like the old crone or Miss McCormick.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe like a ghoul. I think she's just a ghoul. Because doesn't Dominic say she is a ghoul?
Well, she describes like a ghoul as like in folkloric terms is not quite the same thing.
What's a ghoul in folkloric terms,
A
Calvin?
ghoul is more like a zombie.
Yeah, it's not quite like a goblin.
She looks a lot like a zombie. I mean, if
To
we've
be
got to,
fair, but she was also not like trying to eat people.
but she might be the banshee.
Yeah, so
Banshees.
that's sort of what I thought
Predict
too.
death, right?
Yeah, because I thought it felt to me like this has got to be a story that's based on some old folk tale, and it's just you've changed the characters in the setting maybe. So I was wondering if it was based on something like that, because I do know, like the old crone, like that character archetype is clearly in this, and I was like, I wonder what old Irish folktale is this from?
But it might not, like I was reading it up on Martin McDonagh, and it just seems like he wrote a lot of rewrites of fairy tales as kids. He really liked, like things like he even rewrote some of the Grimm stories, which are like, they're not quite dark enough, like it's like another step. So it might be
Inject
based
a little modern horror.
yeah, it's probably like loosely based on an idea of a folk story, but he probably added all these things in because they are very folktale-y. Like she's got to be there, right? You have to have the crone or the banshee or whatever you are.
Right.
It felt very fairy tale-esque, and and that makes it nice too, because it feels like, I love things that you can interpret as like, this is what it is. What I'm seeing is what it is. But also, it's not like that at all. It's like everything else. And it also makes all of the little characters or all the different characters in the town just kind of feel more cohesive or just more interesting. Like it just makes it so fun to watch everybody be like catch on.
Yeah.
One by one. Like the whole first fight, like it's so interesting that the first 15 or 20 minutes, it's basically everybody saying the same thing over and over again in different areas. Like, are you rowing? Are you rowing? Are you rowing? You must be rowing. You should go talk to him. I'll go talk to him, shouldn't I? He won't talk to me. Are you rowing? Yeah. You should go talk to him. And it's like 20 minutes of the movie, but it's so fun to watch.
And I think when you think of it like as a folk tale, and
Yeah.
we've talked before ad nauseum in some episodes about how folk tales are expressions of human unconscious. And so if constantly repeated lines, then maybe that all of that dialogue, all of the characters are just in Park's head, and he's like, I just don't understand. Like, are we rolling? We must be. I don't get it.
I love that. Yeah, he starts to feel like convinced himself. He's like, I guess we must be, right? Like that's the only option.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I think that when we watched Lamb, I think that is much more folkloric than this. I think that Lamb is one of my favorite movies. I know you're looking at the poster. I love that poster.
One of my favorite posters.
I was like, wait, what was Lamb about again? I remember.
Yeah, so great. Cannot recommend enough if anybody else has not watched it at least once. But it's one that takes multiple viewings, and I think here it's not as heavy-handedly folkloric. I think that there are a lot of ways of looking at this movie, and I think that's why like Martin McDonagh is becoming one of my favorite directors, because there are so many levels that it seems that he is either intentionally creating his art to work on in terms of like allegory for the war, allegory for personal legacy, the absurdity of human life and the existential dread of it, as well as all of these folkloric influences and way and metaphors and way he wants to convey his ideas. He has all of those going on at the same time, to the point where like you can choose one, and that's the movie that you're watching. And when you take them all together, it just creates so many levels of clear intention of how he wants to convey something. There are so many things that he can convey that you can take away, and you'll miss a lot too. And I think that's what makes him such an intelligent director and writer. I mean, again, like if he's writing all of these things, then that like, even better.
I was saying the same thing about In Bruges. Like I'm so impressed with how his writing is really clever, and there's a lot of humor in it, despite it being like such a heavy subject matter every movie seems to have. Like I watched 3 Billboards last night, and that's an incredibly depressing movie. And I mean, I like got choked up and got really teary-eyed through parts of it. And none of the dialogue that is humorous though seems to like undercut or take away from what we're supposed to be taking seriously. And I think this movie is the same way.
Yeah.
It is really absurd that this guy is going to mutilate himself over this relationship, but I still think that there's enough like humor in it that it doesn't make this movie like so depressing that you can't get through it, because there's still enough like kind of levity, but that's not taking away from the serious parts of the movie.
It almost enhances them, because you have they're so diametrically opposed that it makes the humor so much blacker and so much funnier, because it's like, oh my god, this is like serious. This is a big deal.
And it's like real life. It's like a real life portrayal.
Yeah.
You get to watch it. It's not just the sensational like, I cut my hand off for you.
We never even saw any
No,
of it.
you never saw him cut his hand off, and you see the aftermath of him just living with his fingers now.
Yeah. I love how he's just so like obvious about it too. Like, I'm not gonna bandage this. I'm just gonna bleed on the town.
Seriously.
I made a note when I was watching Martin McDonagh's other films, and we've complained about like Marvel movies and how all their humor seems to undercut whatever serious moment had just taken place. And I think one of the big differences between what Martin McDonagh does and what like a Marvel movie does is that the characters, it's not like funny to them. Like this is just how they actually are. This is just them actually speaking to each other. And it's funny to the audience because like there's just like little quips and little lines every once in a while that are humorous. In like a Marvel movie, it's like, okay, now have the dramatic pause like for laughter. That way the audience can enjoy it, and like the characters are in on it too. Like they know they're being funny and quippy and everything.
Yeah.
So and it's so unnatural, and it ruins whatever nice moment you built up, because it's like, haha, fart joke after my big dramatic speech.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it, because there's this one part in this movie where Pádraic says something and he's pausing, but only because he's like trying to figure out what's going on. And the thing he said though, everybody in the theater laughed.
Yeah.
So we're all laughing, but still watching him like struggle, and it was still essentially a pause for laughter.
Sure.
Almost. But it didn't feel like that. So
Yeah.
it was really, I thought the humor in this was great. And like I told you guys multiple times, I thought it was way funnier than In Bruges.
Which again,
Your podcast misled me.
that's probably fair. I feel like we did say that there's a lot of really sad and bad things that happen, but I definitely
You didn't
spent a
say
lot of time.
how sad they were.
I spent a lot of time gushing over how funny I think the movie is.
Colin Farrell was like crying like 50% of the movie that he wasn't being an asshole.
It's because he was depressed. That was the point.
Oh, they did so. And in this movie though, they did also such a good job of crying. Like, it gets me so hard when like guys, mostly men, right, are just like, you can tell they're like shaking, or they're like really having a really sad or negative reaction, like right after Parik's told to like go sit somewhere else, and he's like trying to drink his beer, and his like hands are shaking and his face is quivering. Oh, and that happens. Brendan Gleeson does that later too. It's a very similar, like he's kind of shaking because he's sad about something. It's just like gets me.
Yeah, those very real human.
They're super
subtle
real. They're like trying not to show
bits.
it.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, I'm not showing it, and if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
So I want to talk about Dominic and his suicide, or at least I believe it's a suicide. He's fished out of the lake. What do you guys think that means? Because I sort of thought it was just suicide because he had been rejected, but I feel like you guys have a different take on that than I do.
Yeah.
I think it's all of the despair. Like, his father beats him. The only nice person that he ever knew is actually not a nice person at all. And then he gets rejected by Siobhan at the end. So I think those are your options. Either make something of yourself, hurt yourself, or kill yourself. That is like the human condition, and he is one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. He's gonna do, like, I think it's interesting that the priest keeps asking, call him, like, are you gonna do anything about it, about your despair?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, no, I'm not gonna do anything about it. I'm assuming he's talking about, are you gonna hurt yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Because you shouldn't. And I also think it's interesting that they don't even, Parik just says, yeah, he probably slipped or something. I don't know if he's saying that to like save Siobhan the hurt by saying he slipped, or if that's what everyone's going to say that happened. Like, they're not going to say that there's a chance he killed himself.
Yeah, because obviously there are untruths in his letter talking about how Jenny was nuzzling up to him at that moment.
There are a lot of untruths, yeah. The main catalyst for Dominic killing himself was when Parik told him what he did to call him student.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where Dominic was like, yeah, because that's when he says, you're not nice.
Yeah.
And leaves. And the next time you see him, he's asking Siobhan to, like, would you ever, he doesn't even ask her out. He just says, would you ever love someone like me?
Yeah.
Which is such a different thing than, would you ever, like, would you want to get a drink with me, or would you have dinner with me? He's just like,
yeah, it's not even a date.
Would you ever love someone like, would you, the nicest, smartest person I know, right? Even though she's been, very vocally rude to him, she's still probably the nicest person, one of them that he knows.
Yeah.
Like, would anybody ever love me?
Do you guys
That's
think
so sad?
Is it him that's out of focus at the end when
That's what. I
Parik
thought
is
it
waving
was.
to Siobhan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because
I thought it was the woman initially, and then Calvin mentioned it might be it was probably Dominic.
yeah, it was my ideas were either that it was Dominic or no, yeah, it was I didn't think it was Dominic. I thought it was either Colm or it was Miss McCormick, because it was an all black figure, but it was so out of focus that I think that eventually, like, I don't know how. I think he dies right there, and that's why she stops smiling.
Yeah.
But I think that it's weird in the letter that they find his body. I mean, it's probably because nobody else saw him but her.
Yeah. That's why I thought, like, you kind of see the color drain from her face, and she's not as excited about leaving anymore. And I think it's because she sees Dom on top of this cliff, and she is afraid that, oh my gosh, like, what I did to him, like, my rejection is going to lead to him, like, committing suicide here.
Yeah, it's just another ripple.
Yeah. But I did too. I thought maybe it was Colm up there with him, and she was worried that, like, oh my God, like, I was this, like, part of stability in Parik's life. And she was, like, always, like, a buffer between him and between Parik and Colm. And she's like, I'll talk to him, or she's to kind of mediate it.
Yeah.
And so I thought maybe if it was Colm up on the cliff with him, she's like, oh God, like, now it's going to get worse because I'm leaving and I'm not there to, like, kind of stabilize the situation. So I like the idea of, I think it's Dom up there, but I like the idea of, like, just the thought of her leaving. It's her coming to this realization that things are going to change drastically for, like, the people I'm leaving behind. Mm-hmm. And, like, maybe she feels responsible in some way for that, even though she's to happy. Like, follow through with what she needs to do.
Which is also, even just talking about that is so cool, right? Like, no matter who it is, the old lady who could be portending Parik's death, because you already said someone's going to die. So her just being there could be like, hey, he's going to die. She might be freaking out. Or it could be Colin, and she'd be nervous because of that. Or it could be Dominic killing himself. I mean, even that is so interesting that it could be any of those things.
Yeah. And
each one isn't interesting.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up kind of the crone and like the prediction of the two deaths, because I read an article and I was like, well, like these are like really vague, self-fulfilling prophecies. So it's like, of course, and especially if you include animal deaths, which it ended up happening.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it reminds me of like, when people they have their astrology sign, or am I saying that right?
Horoscope.
Horoscope, yeah. And it's like, oh, you're such an Aquarius or whatever. And it's because all the attributes are so vague that you could really kind of assign them to anyone. So when she like makes this prophecy that, oh, two people are going to die, or there will be two deaths. It's like, well, that could be anything.
Yeah.
And it adds kind of like the weird, like I said, like kind of folky mystery to it. It's like, oh, are there real banshees? Is she like magical or mystical in some way? And so I kind of I like it. I like he's got a lot of layers, and it makes you think about his movies.
But she just might be a little old lady shit disturber, right?
Yeah, I think
like
she-
that's just
yeah.
like walking around screwing stuff up and like actually spreading all the gossip. She's like, I'm gonna make this happen by saying it.
Right. But I also think that she's meant to be like a grim reaper, because she has the stick
By the end.
Yeah, at the end. And it's such nice foreshadowing when Dominic is talking about like, what would you grab with this? Maybe something a stick's length away?
When he finds like, it just looks like a shepherd's hook of some sort.
And it looks like
You
a
know.
fish hook.
Or a fish hook, yeah. Well, like it's what they use to fish people out of pools is the first thing I thought.
Oh, and there you go. That's why it's great foreshadowing.
It's just a bigger hook at the end. So yeah, I feel like there's so many things that could have happened there.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that it almost feels like the policeman's on his way to probably kill Parik. Or he's at least arrest him, but who knows how bad he'll beat him first.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being Dominic. It just kind of swerves away.
But I think like with like looking at Dominic's character and looking at Miss McCormick, the more times I watch this movie, I think I'll come away with more theories. I think that my purgatory and suicide theory in Bruges In Bruges came after a couple viewings, and I think there's a lot more material here than even in that movie to wade through and find another little allegory, another little inspiration of how he decided to craft this tale, because there's just so much.
And even going into that, you wanted to talk about the animals and all these.
Yeah, like it felt like they were very, very omnipresent in the end. Like they were all over the house. There was a lot of shots with animals as well, but I just think it made it feel more fantastical when they were all living in the house with him. And I was wondering what you guys really took from that.
I didn't take a lot. I didn't really have a lot to think about them all there in the end, I guess. I think the biggest thing I felt with both like the animals and with Dominic is, look at what's going on in the town with these people. And look at the innocent things, innocent people and animals that are being really hurt because of it. And they almost, there's the chance that the dog could have died, that Colm's dog could have been killed. It's like, just look at all of your choices you're having with your own feuds. Again, how it's rippling out, how it's hurting other people. And in this case, killing the most innocent of all the people and the most innocent of all the animals, So I think I got a lot of that. Like, here are the animals, and Dominic I feel like kind of goes in that group as the innocent kind of bystanders or viewers of the situation that are just kind of like, they're always watching. There's always like an animal watching, like what's going on, which is interesting.
I sort of thought of it as like he's lost like everything, and it was always against the rule for him to have the animals in the house. And so it's like, well, everything's already going so bad, so I'm going to go ahead and just break the rules and indulge for a minute.
Or if you've broken all the rules, and if you get to this point, are you becoming an animal?
Yeah.
Like, does God care about you anymore? Because that's something else they bring up. Like, do you think that God cares about, the donkey? And Colum's like, I'm afraid that he doesn't. I'm afraid he doesn't care about the innocent things. You're right? Like,
sure.
And so I think that's interesting. Like, is Parik's not innocent anymore? So is he surrounding himself by innocence to feel better? Or is he becoming something that no one cares about, and not even God? Like, so much stuff.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point. I think of it more as a metaphor of like we are the cattle to God. Like, why would he care about that when there's such a level of difference in cognitive ability between us and animals, and then God and humans? Like, when we say, like, I'm afraid he might not care about the animals, like, what is really the difference between humans and animals to God? He might not care about us either. And I think that's the real struggle at the heart of all of the characters' problems in this movie. Is like, what does any of it matter? Does, like, God actually care about us, or are we just miniature donkeys to him as well?
Yeah, no,
Just really cute. God's like, I gotta put people on here because look how cute they are.
That was so cute. Yeah, like, when it started, like picked up its pace, like, oh, don't leave me.
Yeah, it's right under the breath.
Jenny.
I like the little bell. It was really sad when it gets knocked over
At
the
the
table
end.
at the end, and he's like, set it back up. I was
He's
like,
ringing it. That was something really cool. Like, all of to just kind of like throw something out there, the bell and the clock, like all of the tolling of the bells and the chimes. And even at the end, like, there was the moment when I think it was in the morning and it kind of wakes you up and it kind of has this more tinkling bell or something. I think it's after when Colum's house has been burned. It felt very similar to the feeling like after the rest of the movie and the music that had been happening, that kind of like tinkling wake up morning felt very similar to like a sound bath, where at the end they almost always use some brighter tones to kind of wake you up and like help you transition into like the daytime and like kind of the end of the experience. So I thought that was kind of cool, like talking about like the ending and kind of like the finality. The sound made me feel more final than anything else that happened,
right,
like plot wise or character wise. It just kind of, I felt very like relaxed, but also like awake at the end. It felt very interesting. But only because I've done like a lot of sound baths and meditations and stuff. So that was so resonant to me.
Okay.
You know,
I've never heard what a sound, I've never heard the phrase sound bath before.
Check it out. You could do a sound bath.
Okay.
Like sound meditation or like.
And be sure that you set it to massage before you like get into it.
No, but like it usually, it starts by, usually people like to get calm and then you get into these deeper tones. It's going through all the like the idea that
it's a group meditation with music.
Sure.
And
vibrational. It's getting you on the same vibrational level.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Be sure that you bring your horoscope with you.
Come on, it's for real.
It's very different. Like it feels very nice, and like, I mean,
Calvin
if you've
did
ever
one with me.
yeah, if you've ever meditated before, or like done like more like what are those like guided meditations too? It feels like a guided meditation, but specifically with
sound.
With just sound.
Which I loved all the music in this film.
Oh, the music was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that vibe of like, I remember that was my favorite thing about being in Ireland is just like people just playing in the pub. There's always people playing and singing, and anybody can go up and sing.
Oh, that's
They'll be like, there's a lot of times they'll just be like, I mean, sometimes they have like bands or whatever, but a lot of times it's just somebody in the corner playing. And if you know a song, you can walk over and be like, oh, do you know this song? And they're like, yeah, sing it.
Huh.
I never did that because I didn't know the songs, but it seems like everybody kind of knows the same songs.
I can just, if that happened in like an American bar and someone just like walked in with their guitar and started playing, there'd be so many people like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, get out of here. Everyone would be so negative about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that cultural difference there where it's like welcome and it's like a group thing. Like it's collective.
Also makes it like feel so much harder if your friend was like, yeah, don't hang out here anymore.
Yeah.
It's like our whole community and cultural experience is just based around hanging out, drinking, and being nice to each other.
It's this pub and this church. Where am I supposed to go?
Yeah.
At these times.
So then I guess we can wrap this up and move to the end. I guess I thought we were gonna get more finality out of it, like they were gonna come to terms with their relationship or the new version of their relationship. And the movie kind of seems to end on a like, okay, well, like, see you tomorrow. We're gonna keep doing this. Like, Pádraic is going to keep trying to convince him, and Colm is going to continue to cut off fingers. And I wonder, do you think it works better if it's kind of that vague ending where like you just assume that this is going to carry on, or did you want them to have a conclusion? Because I felt like, I wanted to know how they turned out, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's different when whether you think of this as a narrative conclusion or as an allegorical conclusion. Because if it's the conclusion of the allegory, it makes a whole lot of sense because it's all about how the Civil War is still going on and there's no end in sight, or like it looks like we're coming to the end, but I don't know. Those guys could start fighting at any
it's
point.
like
It's the perfect example of that metaphor. But if you're looking for the narrative conclusion, I think that's, again, it's why his movies are so good, is because they feel very true, very real, and very human, in that there is no ending to human life until death. So it's all of this weird absurdity in between.
Yeah, because that's what basically Park said. He's like, well, if you would have been in there, it would be, wouldn't it? But you weren't, so it's not over because you're not dead. You're still here. So I'll probably help you build your house, and I'm going to burn it down again.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be like, what else do we do? So... yeah, I think in the moment I was like, oh, is there going to be one more scene? Maybe like Siobhan, like walking down the road or something, like something hopeful. But there wasn't. It just ended. Mm-hmm. But yeah, in retrospect, I think I liked it just kind of being like, well, it's going to keep going. Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense on a large scale and on a small scale.
Sure. And it makes sense, yeah, to be like, well, there's always something that might set it off again. Like, so it makes sense, I suppose. I just... I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just over. And I felt like,
yeah.
And I think part of that is I just enjoyed the two characters so much that I was like, oh, I wanted more of this. So I was a little sad, I think, at the end when I was like, oh, that's it.
I was sad because it almost felt like Colin was kind of like, once all that kind of felt like it almost felt like he'd come to somewhat of a conclusion for him.
Yeah.
Because it almost felt like he was opening up to Pork a little bit.
Yeah.
He was kind of like talking to him and being like, okay, well, it's done now, right? And Pork's like, no. It just started basically because it just started like, he's like, you did what it's like, you accomplished your goal, but now it's going to go on forever.
Yeah. It felt like, it was getting to the point where maybe they were going to forgive each other and be friends again. He's like, thanks for watching my dog, or thanks for taking care of my dog. Oh, and then it's like, but we're still fighting. I was like, oh, okay. Well.
Yeah. And it was so sad because again, he almost cried. Park almost cried, right? It was just like any time, and his like voice was breaking, and it's like, oh, the things that will be no more.
It certainly wasn't a bad ending. I just I wondered what you guys thought of it, because I was like, oh, I would have liked more movie after that. Yeah,
in the moment, definitely felt that.
All right, so wrapping this up after this discussion, Calvin, do you still have the same opinion? Did you see the same movie?
You know, after the more we talk about it, I think that the better through line for all of these different things is that it's our own self-interests that seem to make life suck. Like, that's really the absurdity and the horrific nature of the human condition, is that our self-interest, which we seem primed to follow, are ultimately what hurt ourselves and hurt everybody else. So that's the movie that I saw.
It just sucks, though, you know? It sucks to think of it like that. It would be so much nicer to just be like, this is a movie about the war, or this is a movie about a madman. But it really is just like, the more we try to do what we think is best for ourselves, the more like we just ruin everything for everyone else. It just kind of sucks.
Yeah, what is that?
You know, it just like makes me feel like it's not the best world.
What is that phrase? It's like cut off your nose to spite your face or whatever. That's what this like whole movie felt like to me. It's everything that everyone's doing is hurting themselves more than helping, even though they feel like they're doing the right thing. Like for Colin, it's like his life will be better if he cuts out what to him is a bad relationship, and in the process he has mutilated himself. And Park he's lost kind of that joy and that innocence he had because of what this loss of relationship is doing. And the more he tries to pursue that relationship, the more, it's like what Dom says. It's like he realizes like, no, this isn't a good guy anymore. Yeah. And it's the whole movie. Yeah, it is really sad to be like.
And he still just wants to be more interesting, right? Because Park's like, well, I was interesting when I was kind of mean.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And same thing, like Jenny dies because of Colm's fingers. Yeah. But Parek's also the one that pushed him to it. So it's just it's at the level, he's one level removed from Jenny's death still as well.
Yeah, and Siobhan never picked up the fingers. No one picked up the fingers.
I don't know why you would.
Well, because...
just feed him to something. I guess maybe that's probably the moral. Don't do that.
Put your fingers in the trash where they belong.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like I saw like 3 movies.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like we said, like just even the idea of who's the person that's out of focus on the cliff. I think there's a lot of different takes on this movie.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them are. I like all the ideas we had, like because it certainly is. I think an allegory for the war, but it certainly is like a story about legacy, like Calvin brought up at the beginning. So it's a lot of different things, which is why I think McDonagh makes such great movies, because I think there's definitely little pieces you can take, and then on rewatches you can find different messages or how it impacted you in a different way. I think he's a wonderful filmmaker.
I think he's gotten better.
I think In Bruges is one of the finest movies ever made, and you're wrong.
I'm going to keep throwing shade at it till the day I die. It's
See,
not
it sounds
over
like
till I'm over.
It seems like you need to rewatch it.
All right, I said my piece.
All right, so on a scale of 1 to 10 severed fingers, what do you give this film?
It can only get to 5, technically.
That's not true.
He only cut 5 off.
He only cut 5 off. He only gave the movie 5 fingers. But I would give it more like, it's just so good. It just doesn't fit my aesthetic a lot of times and my more psychological things that I particularly like out of movies. So to me, it's like a 9.3 severed
Whoa.
fingers, though. It's so good. I don't remember where I put In Bruges. I think I knocked a couple points off for the sensationalism.
Dude, I think we all had it at like 8 or 9. That was he. We should have had Katya on, because then it would have.
Yeah, maybe she would have changed the average.
Because I feel like we spent a lot of
changed the
time
average.
talking about how much we all loved it. So
Yeah,
it
you
would have
guys
been
spent a lot
more
of time
controversy.
talking about alcoves.
Yeah.
And that'll literally happen like 2 times in the movie.
And that's what was so great about it, because he knows exactly how often to revisit a topic for the maximum amount of comedy.
Well, I loved this movie.
Okay.
I liked it a lot. I think it's one of my favorites that we've watched and reviewed so far, I think. So I'll say 9.5. I want to give it more than Calvin. I also
yeah.
thought it was beautiful. I thought so many things about it were beautiful.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
So yeah, 9.5.
Jeez Louise, I feel bad now. Like
Don't.
I think it's like 7. I thought
7?
it was fine. I had it. I think part of the problem is I just watched a bunch of his other movies, and I like 3 Billboards better than this, and I like In Bruges better than this. This is certainly better than 7 Psychopaths. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that was
I've heard that one gets really, really meta.
yeah.
Which makes sense. Like after watching all of his other movies, like there's a lot more going on than you think. So it makes sense that he just made a whole movie about the meta of filmmaking.
It's his worst writing, I think, out of the now 4 McDonagh films I've seen. It's like there's so much clever humor in all of his movies. That one is just like really kind of right in your face, and it's not nuanced at all.
They make you want to see his plays, right? Like see how they would transition.
Sure.
Like if it was his play instead of a movie. Even this one feels like it could be a good play.
Yeah, but I thought that the chemistry between Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell was so good in Bruges, and I think this movie kind of suffered a little bit by not having them interact more, and I just liked them so much in the last movie that I was expecting to see that chemistry again, and having them at odds with each other, I didn't think made for like as entertaining of characters as I was hoping for, but still I thought it was a great movie, and I wonder if part of it is I just had expectations, and I also have liked his other films, and so I shouldn't have just watched them right before this one.
I don't know. I think it was nice when you can use somebody's like real life relationship and past relationships to avoid having to say anything about it. So I think that's nice. Just even knowing that they're good friends in real life, it's like we could say something about it, and I think that would feel nice.
Right.
But it's nice also not to have to watch it.
Sure.
While you wait for the real thing.
I'll also say, like, with the disclaimer that it's a 7, but I think it can only be better. I'm not going to revisit it and be like, oh, this isn't as good as I remember it being. I think like the same with In Bruges and then 3 Billboards. The more times I watched those, the more I appreciated what I was seeing, and the more I took different parts out of it. So I think, like I said, with McDonagh's movies, there's a lot to pull out of them, and on the surface they can be really entertaining, like In Bruges, but then there's like deeper parts. So I think this movie is the same way for me. So I'll like it more the more I watch it, I think.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap this up. Calvin, thanks for being on.
Of course.
And Katya, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And with that, we're going to wrap up. You can find our podcast on any platform like Spotify and Apple Music. We also upload all these to YouTube. So go ahead and leave a comment. Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us what we're doing wrong. And thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.